fear the most? We chase the nightmares that haunt your cowardly dreams. The deadlier the prey, the more we exult in the hunt, the more we honor our gods. This harsh land breeds the savage, and we revel in it. The old world calls. Ripe for our taking. We fought monsters, and we became them.
Hey people, welcome back. I'm Mini Pride from Milk and Cookies Total War, and Norsca was just officially announced as a playable race pack for Total War Warhammer 1, and as the pre-order bonus for Game 2 as expected. And it's looking like they might not just be Warriors of Chaos Light. There are some incredibly epic looking units on the way, and it sounds like Norsca will be very well differentiated on the campaign map in terms of mechanics as well, which I'll cover in a little bit. But Norsca's addition, it's honestly just a huge deal for this trilogy. I really can't overstate it, because it means that Creative Assembly has a lot of wiggle room in their contract with Games Workshop to flesh out minor races like Kislev and Araby, and others that either never had official army books, or just existed as supplements in earlier editions of the tabletop game. It opens the door for so many factions a lot of us didn't expect to ever see when the game first launched. The CG trailer was really good, but the roster reveal and screenshots were even better and confirm a lot of the units I covered and expected to see when I did my Norsca lore, army, and tactics video more than a month ago. And we got a release date, August 10th, so about 3 weeks from now. Without further ado, let's go through the roster reveal and talk about the lore and implementation of the lords and units we see on screen. So this is Wulfrik the Wanderer, the Eternal Challenger, champion of the Sarl tribe, and Chaos Undivided. He was an incredibly skilled duelist, capable of taking on the most powerful warriors of any enemy army, seeking them out in single combat, and invariably decapitating them in short order. In Norsca, this essentially makes you a rock star, right? All the ladies want you, all the men envy you, and your head starts getting really big. Hubris isn't an uncommon thing in the North, obviously. You kind of need swagger and braggadocio to be noticed by the Dark Gods, but in Wulfric's case, he got a bit more than he bargained for. He was incredibly cocky, even for the Northmen, and claimed he was the equal or superior of literally any Chaos Warrior or other warrior on the planet or in the Warp, which is quite a bold claim to make in a world comprised of the greatest warriors in history, and it pissed off a lot of the Chaos Gods when he said that. So he was visited by an emissary of the Ruinous Powers in his dreams, who gave him some pretty important gifts and a very important curse. He was charged to travel the four corners of the world to seek out the fiercest challengers, the most monstrous creatures, and most ferocious adversaries, and slay them all in single combat to prove his worth. If he failed, he would be cursed to eternal damnation and torture as a plaything for demons. If he succeeded in defeating all comers, however, he would be one of the greatest champions of chaos in history and ascend to demonhood. He was given the gift of tongues, which allows him to talk crap in any language on the planet. When he wants to duel a particularly powerful dwarf, he automatically speaks in perfect Khazalid and knows exactly what to say to make them angry and to goad them into a fight. When he sails to Nagaroth on his ghost ship Seafang, he can speak to the Dark Elves in perfect Druhir, and purely with his way of words, force Dreadlords into duels to the death. His longship Seafang can fade into the realm of chaos and essentially warp to new locations in incredibly short order, so he can sail the world in, like, days or hours, essentially, and it gives him an insane amount of mobility on the high seas, which is, of course, a great way to get around the world, duel people to the death, and steal their treasure and their ladies. Remains to be seen if Seafang will be implemented in the game in some way, either as a legendary item that grants abilities, or as a campaign movement mechanic, like a bonus that allows his armies to just move very quickly. but he is the quintessential duelist, which means he can duel lords in the middle of a crowd of enemies and still deal good damage to them, as opposed to melee experts who spread their damage in a wider AoE. And his Hunter of Champions ability pins enemies on the spot, reducing melee and armor of the target. So that's extremely good against enemy heroes and lords. You can pin them in place and essentially force them to duel you. You can also mount a god dang Chaos War Mammoth, which is so cool. It has to be one of the coolest mounts in all of Warhammer Fantasy, and I cannot wait to see him in action tomorrow. Now, a few people called this, but the other legendary lord for Norsca is going to be Throgg the Troll King. Throgg lives near Kislev in the heart of Troll Country, at the heart of an icy labyrinth strewn with the gnawed corpses of once mighty heroes. He sits brooding upon his rocky throne. No fanfare announces his arrival, no vassals pay him tithe, and no courtiers vie for his favor. His subjects are drooling, stinking monsters, and his domain a desolate and wind-whipped wasteland. A filth-encrusted crown rings one of the Troll King's tusks, a once priceless heirloom taken from a great warrior whose quest led him only into Throgg's gullet. That symbol of his power is the Wintertooth Crown, which binds monsters and trolls to his will, and for generations, great Bretonnian and Imperial and Kislevite heroes and knights have sought out his lair, and all have ended up in his stomach. What sets him apart more than anything else is his intelligence. Trolls are stupid. They're well known for being really, really dumb. In fact, they even had a special rule for stupidity in the tabletop. But Throgg was gifted with a malign cunning by the Chaos Gods, and he is much, much smarter than your average troll. And he uses that brain of his incredibly well on the battlefield and in the staging of his campaigns. Which is important because without him, his army would literally be mouth-breathing droolers unable to coordinate an assault on a poorly defended border town, much less the major cities of the Empire. But with him, though, they're absolutely terrifying. In the end times, he bashes Sigvald the Magnificent's head in and pisses on his corpse after the Geld Prince ruined his hands fighting Krell, a particularly fitting end for the petulant Slaaneshi pornstar, and frankly, a pretty significant notch on Throgg's belt. It's not every aspiring champion that can claim they killed the champion and favored son of the Dark Prince. The Wintertooth Crown special item gives all nearby warbeasts and monsters his leadership value in tabletop, so essentially, it keeps trolls and other units typically known for having crappy morale the ability to stick in combat for much longer than would normally be expected of them. And if it wasn't already clear to you, Throgg's entire campaign and army compositions are going to focus on recruiting Death Star wrecking balls of trolls and other monstrous units to slam into and quickly overwhelm opponents. Troll variants will get serious buffs under his red tree, and their upkeep will very likely be lessened as well. He also has a special ability called Copious Vomit, a breath weapon that completely negates armor saves, and I cannot wait to see that in action. That sounds so cool. And mutant regeneration, so I'm expecting Hydra levels of regen on him, effectively double that of what normal trolls have. So health regen, especially on lords with huge AoE attacks and fast movement, is extremely good, so I can see him being a very good pick in campaign and multiplayer. And on top of all that, he has armor piercing and a frostbite mechanic that a lot of units on this roster share that slows down enemies. No mount options obviously because he's a troll, but my god, with frostbite, with AP, with good movement speed, with his abilities, he just sounds like an absolute boss in Total War Warhammer. For faction and campaign mechanics, in the trailer they hinted at monster hunting, and a PC Games article that came out today seems to confirm that that will play a large role in the campaign. They say, and I quote, "Players can embark on monster hunt quests and construct towering monoliths to court favor of the Dark Gods." So it sounds like we'll have the opportunity to hunt down specific monsters in the Warhammer world to gain favor for the Dark Gods, which sounds like a really cool mechanic if it's a series of quest battles, which I'm getting that vibe right now. Remember for Game 1, a lot of people requested a feature where wild and crazy monsters from the Warhammer world could appear during battle and attack, and it sounds like these monster quests might be a very similar feature. Hinting at their strategic mechanics, you can also construct towering monoliths to each Chaos God, but Norskins have different names for them. So they aren't Tzeentch, Khorne, Nurgle, and Slaanesh to the Norskins. They're called things like the Hound for the Khorne and the Raven for Tzeentch. So when I hear constructing idols, it sounds like either a building tree where you can gain favor towards some kind of endgame mechanic specific to each god, or you get the option to erect them after raising or sacking a settlement. Again, we don't know what the end game of gaining that favor will be, but I'd imagine they will be separate buffs based on which god you're looking to build favor towards, which sounds like a really cool mechanic and a pretty awesome prelude to what the Warriors of Chaos might get when their marks and god-specific units and lords are added later down the line. It is important to remember here, I think, that Wulfrik and Throgg aren't Chaos casualties. I honestly don't think we would have ever gotten them later down the line without Norsca, because God-aligned rosters will have lords like Valkia for Khorne, Festus for Nurgle, and Village the Curseling for Tzeentch, and I just don't think there would have been space left over for Wulfrik or Throgg. So I think this is a blessing, because we would not have been able to see them in the trilogy if Norsca wasn't coming. In terms of battle mechanics, it seems like CA is starting to add these faction-wide buffs like martial and murderous prowess for the Dark Elves and High Elves to every faction now, which I really like because there were special rules in the tabletop that reflected those, but they need to do that for the older factions too. They did confirm today that literally every faction in Game 1 is getting new content soon, and even Norsca will be getting free content as well. So to me, that means either new lords or regiments of renown. I don't want to be too hopeful on that front, but honestly, with all of these hints they're dropping, and the fact that even Norsca is getting free content with the race pack, regiments of renown seem like a possibility, simply because CA knows how much we want them, and will, I would think, want to equalize the balance between the races. It's not really fair to have Empire and Greenskins with regiments of renown when the Beastmen still don't have anything. And Wood Elves were confirmed to also be getting stuff as well. So literally, I'm talking about every single faction in Game 1, even the DLC stuff, will be getting free LC soon. We just don't know what it is yet. But yeah, faction abilities for Norsca are Rage and Berserk. Once each Norscan infantry unit gets into combat, they have a meter where they build extra leadership, extra physical resistance, and extra damage the longer they stay in combat. Rage is the lower level version of this, but Berserk allows them to reach these buffs much faster and will be exclusive to some units. For lord choices, we just get one. It's the generic Marauder Chieftain, which is customizable and can devote himself to a specific god and their marks, which is really cool and really needs to be in the Warriors of Chaos roster at some point. But just the fact that all this stuff is being added for Norsca right now, honestly, is a gigantic hint that Chaos will be getting some really cool mechanics later down the line to buff them up. If not in Game 1, then certainly when they get their Ruinous Powers rework for Game 3, or whenever that happens, when they get Skull Crushers and Hellstriders and all those god-specific units. For heroes, Norsca has some really great choices. One that I'm incredibly excited for is the Skinwolf Werekin, which right there confirms Skinwolves are in the game. I am so happy they got added. Without question, the unit I was most hyped for, and CA delivered. Witch Cursed or Chaos Tainted, these men and women, these skin wolves, are half feral and subject to ferocious appetites. They carry with them a taint in the blood, a mutation that shows not readily as stigmata on their flesh, but slumbers within them, a beast waiting to be unleashed by blood and unspeakable ritual. When this horror is unleashed, when it's released, no mere transformation of man into beast is affected. Instead, the humanoid wolf thing, lean and half insane with insatiable hunger, rips its way fully from the body of the man, which is left little more than shredded flaps of skin and chunks of bloody gristle by the freeing monster. So it's like this monster is literally hidden within him and will tear its way out of the human body. And it's from these shrouds of skin and flaps that kind of hang off the werewolf, that's where they get the name Skin Wolves, because this bloody, tattered skin is just hanging off them as they charge into battle. They're frenzied creatures whose packs are formed by kinship ties of blood and slaughter, and they care not what they kill in their bloodlust and bear no loyalty to any master save for the dark gods themselves. On tabletop, they cause fear, they have regeneration, they have frenzy, and they can take marks of chaos, which is pretty bananas considering how good they are already. So on tabletop, Mark of Tzeentch further increases their health regeneration, Mark of Khorne grants them +1 strength on their attacks, Mark of Nurgle grants them poison, and Mark of Slaanesh grants always strikes first. Those are some incredibly potent abilities when combined with a regenerating, very fast monster unit that's known for hunting down other monsters or cavalry. They're big too, maybe not quite as big as trolls, but their size alone is pretty intimidating. Without a doubt, my most anticipated unit in this race pack. They're super cool looking, and if CA does them full justice, they'll be incredibly fun to use as well. And of course, we can finally do those long-awaited Twilight roleplays. Just gotta mod in some sparkles for good old Vlad. But yeah, the Skin Wolf Werekin has anti-large damage, physical resistance, regeneration, and is very fast. All of that stuff is already confirmed by CA. So moving on through the heroes, the Fimir Balefiend is a reptilian monstrous caster from the marshlands that can sunder armor, is very tanky, and can cast spells, but has a limited selection of lores of magic to choose from. The Fimir are an incredibly cool addition. We were not sure we were going to get them, but we did talk about that in the Norsca Lore, Army, and Tactics video, and these guys were around long before the rise of man. They worshipped the Chaos Gods, and for a long time, they enjoyed their favor, but over time, the eye of the Dark Gods was swiftly drawn to the more vibrant and amusing race of man who were more fickle, and the Fimir were abandoned, essentially reduced to seeking boons from bound daemons where once they had enjoyed the blessings of their gods. Only the Fimir sorcerers, known as Balefiends, spend prolonged periods in the land beyond the mist, but occasionally they all go out and try to kill stuff to earn the favor of chaos. They were pretty much phased out of Warhammer Fantasy for a long time and just kind of fell by the wayside early on in like 3rd or 4th edition, so a long time ago, but they're here now in all of their glory. And we'll talk a little bit more about their mechanics in a bit, because there's another unit that is also a Fimir from the Fimir race. So, Norscan Shaman Sorcerers will be your jack-of-all-trade casters, more lores of magic to choose from. They're just regular humans, but they're squishy, and not melee capable quite like the Balefiends, like I said. They can wade into melee, sunder armor, they're tanky, so all those things are very rare, honestly, for a caster, and they're monstrous, so they're pretty big as well. And then Marauder Spearmen will give you some cheap mainline staying power with charge defense against large and a bonus versus large. Hunters have anti-large javelin projectile, so one thing that I think would be pretty cool is use the Frostbite with some of your other units, because a lot of this roster has that Frostbite mechanic, to slow down enemies, and then you can slaughter them with your range damage. So that's really good at pinning enemy cav in place, or enemy monsters. Just tie them down, get something in there to tie them down, and make them very slow, and then just rip them up from range. And I think these hunters actually might have the first anti-large ammunition type in the vanilla game. I know Horsemasters have anti-large jabs in Steel Faith, but I don't think it exists in vanilla currently. No, actually, I guess the Hammer of the Witches for the Empire, the canon has it. But yeah, pretty cool stuff there. Anti-large jabs is going to be pretty strong, I think, at hunting monsters, which of course is what their entire purpose is for. The Norscan Champions are the only heavily armored infantry unit for Norsca. Most are very lightly armored, as we expected from Marauders. A lot of them are just shirtless. But the longer they're in melee, the better they perform with Berserk, which synergizes extremely well. Being armored, having staying power, means they can trigger that stage, the later stages of Berserk, more easily. And Berserkers are another unit, kind of a high tier one, but they're glass cannons. They're very lightly armored frenzy unit of angry gingers who obviously have Berserk, because they're Berserkers, and they will rip stuff up if you can somehow keep them alive in melee combat. They will tear through lightly armored infantry like a hot knife through butter. And now, we move on to the Norscan Ice Wolves, who have Frostbite, which allow you to pin units in place with that slowing mechanic and shred them with the Hunters. So I think the Hunters and the Norscan Ice Wolves specifically will have a lot of synergy there, because it's even better than Poison, the Frostbite. It sounds like it's going to slow stuff down very considerably, but not affect their melee stats. And now we move to the really juicy stuff, the monsters. So Skin Wolves come in 2 variants, unarmored and armored. They both have regeneration, physical resistance, and anti-large, but while one is incredibly fast and agile with close to 0 armor and good for flanking, the other is more of a mainline monster to help hold the line and keep your Marauders in the fight. Fimir Warriors also have 2 great weapon variants. They're these slow, heavily armored monsters with Cyclops eyes and a big beak. Pretty crazy looking, and they have a unique From the Mists ability, which makes them hard to hit and reads them in this otherworldly condensation. We don't know exactly how that hard to hit mechanic's going to work. It might just lower melee attack for enemy units that are nearby. Not exactly sure yet. They sunder armor and deal armor piercing damage and have magical attacks that go through physical resistance, so they sound like they're going to be incredibly beastly if they're at a decent price. Norscan Trolls are also in. I think they're just regular trolls, but Norscan Ice Trolls are a variant that are unique to Norsca, and they look really awesome. So they have this Frostbite slow when they attack, and they even vomit shards of ice although I don't know if that's like the passive attack that trolls already have in the game, or if it will be an active ability like Throgg's Vomit, which is a point-and-click ability. I hope it's an active ability. I think that those are more fun to use and actually imbue different properties than the ones that are just regular attack animations, but they look absolutely incredible. They're these gigantic trolls with this huge two-handed war club made of ice. So the roster is already sounding pretty good to me, but on top of all that, we're getting Chaos War Mammoths, which clearly were confirmed in the trailer, but these have some variants as well. And man, I am so excited to finally get to see them in action. They are definitely in the top 3. If Skin Wolves are my top 1, they're probably my second most anticipated unit in the entire DLC. So the Feral Mammoth is the biggest unit in the game alongside the other mammoth types, and it's a line breaker, of course, is what you'd expect from a 10-ton gigantic elephant. Has low leadership, as all feral units do, but it deals exceptionally well with big blocks of infantry. Not so good against killing single entity units because the damage spreads out so much from the attack, but they are this tainted and savage race of mammoths, obviously, transformed by the raw and mutating powers of chaos into beasts of destruction. But they're not actually evil like a lot of other chaos animals or mutated monsters. They're just angry and they're territorial all the time and don't really care what gets in their way. They're absolutely gigantic, as you can tell from the screenshot, and their size is a big reason they are considered as living totems of might and power, and these creatures are basically sought after by the competing tribes of the north, and they're used as weapons to conquer enemies and to help steal their stuff. So great honor and fear are attached to any warrior that can successfully tame them, and there are very few that can. Having one in your tribe is a very big deal. It means you're going to be doing a lot better up north in the warlike culture that the Norskins exhibit. So the War Mammoth with Howdah has hunters that throw javelins from the top of this gigantic platform on top, so it'll be kind of a hybrid, but still mostly monster focused like the Arachnarok Spider. A little bit of range damage, but mostly focused on the DPS from the monster itself. And again, those hunters' jabs will be anti-large, and they're very heavily armored when compared to a feral mammoth. We are even getting the Chaos War Shrine on top of all these guys, which is absolutely insane. So the War Shrine War Mammoth is an anchor and centerpiece unit that projects an aura of improved leadership, allowing Marauders to get more benefit from rage by staying in the fight for longer. So kind of think of the Grail Reliquary, but on steroids. And instead of 2 scrub peasants using coconuts to clop around as they carry around a dead guy, it's on top of a 10-ton beast that can trample you into oblivion. The War Shrine also has a special ability called Glimmer of Glory that targets single units and makes them unbreakable, which again synergizes incredibly well if you want to get high tier rage of Berserk going on a specific unit. The Marauder Ice Wolf Chariot is a hybrid ranged and melee chariot pulled by huge Norscan wolves. They also have access to the Feral Manticore, and the other big monsters, this is where we really care as well. This is the Frostworm, an ice dragon with a frostbite and a chilling aura like the Chillgeist Regiment of Renown, the Hex race from the Grim in the Grave DLC, which combined will grant massive slows in an AoE. So you're not just getting the frostbite mechanic, you're also getting that chilling aura that the Chillgeists have. So that could end up being insanely powerful. If it lands on you, you aren't going anywhere. So backing up engagements, it's going to be such a force multiplier, quite similar to the Frostheart Phoenix in Game 2, I feel. And yeah, it's going to be a very nice addition to their roster. And finally, they get the Norscan Giant, which will have its own unique model, but will function just how we expect a Giant to. I haven't been able to find any screenshots of it, but it had what they showed on livestream was pretty funny. It has its own kind of silly, drunken looking model, like he looks like he's an alcoholic. But obviously he's a giant meat grinder against infantry, but hugely susceptible to focus fire from missiles, which is why I don't really like giants in Total War Warhammer. 1 or 2 skirmishers from an opponent and focus fire just absolutely melts them away. They're so slow, they can't really want to run away. But yeah, this roster looks absolutely amazing to me. A lot of the predictions made a month ago ended up being pretty accurate, and I think they're going to be a fantastic addition to this trilogy. And then, of course, like I already mentioned, what it means for more factions later down the line that we didn't really expect to see. I think it really bodes well for Kislev and Araby, and maybe a few other minor factions as well. It just sounds like an incredibly well fleshed out DLC. Obviously, we need to know more about the campaign mechanics themselves, but it already sounds like they're off to a good start on that front. And I'm just very excited to see them in action on live stream tomorrow. So make sure you join me on Wednesday after the live stream I'll have a video where I talk about the mechanics and units that we see in battle, and hopefully we get some campaign gameplay as well. Thank you all for watching, stay on the hype train, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Let me know what you think of the army roster and the trailer.